For over a decade, I managed my wife's family company, eventually growing it to an $85 million valuation. At a family gathering, my wife and her father smiled and said, "Your wife's new husband will be taking charge now." I felt my heart drop. The following morning at the office, everything turned on its head. The aroma of pine needles and the soft hum of family conversations enveloped me as I stood at the threshold of the Thompson family estate. The grand chandelier overhead cast a warm glow, illuminating the faces of those I held dear. I, Michael Thompson, had spent the last 12 years not just as the head of Thompson Enterprises, but as the heart of this family, a role I cherished as much as the empire I helped build. Elizabeth, my wife, was the epitome of grace, her laughter mingling with the clinking of glasses. Her father, George, stood by the fireplace, his eyes reflecting both pride and a hint of the shrewd businessman he once was. He had passed the torch to me, and under my stewardship, what was once a modest family business had blossomed into a multi-million-dollar empire, now valued at $85 million. Elizabeth often praised my business acumen, her words like a balm to my soul, while George, though initially skeptical, had come to see me as the son he never had. Our lives were an intricate tapestry of personal and professional threads. Family. Gatherings like this one were not just about catching up. They were strategic sessions, where the future of Thompson Enterprises was as much a topic as the latest family gossip. The estate, with its sprawling gardens and rooms filled with antiques, was the perfect backdrop for such discussions, each piece of furniture whispering tales of past triumphs and challenges. As the evening unfolded, the atmosphere was charged with anticipation. The air was thick with the scent of pine, but there was an undercurrent of something else, something unspoken. Elizabeth, with her usual poise, stood to address the room. Her voice, usually so steady, trembled slightly, betraying the gravity of what she was about to say. Beside her, George's face was unreadable, his usual warmth replaced by a stern resolve. He nodded at Elizabeth, giving her the floor. My heart began to race, sensing that whatever was about to be revealed would not just change the course of our business, but the very fabric of our family. And then, Elizabeth spoke, her words sending my world into a tailspin. "Michael, there's something we need to discuss about the future of Thompson Enterprises and our family." The gathering was in full swing, with laughter and the clinking of glasses echoing through the grand hall. I was in high spirits, discussing the latest quarter's profits with some of the board members, when Elizabeth, with her father by her side, called for everyone's attention. "Michael, dear," Elizabeth began, her voice sweet yet carrying an edge I hadn't heard before, "we have some news." She paused, looking at her father, who nodded encouragingly. "Your wife's new husband will be taking charge now." The room fell, silent. My heart felt like it had been encased in ice. New husband? I looked at Elizabeth, searching for any sign that this was a cruel jest, but her expression was serene, almost relieved. George's smile was one of satisfaction, not the usual warmth he showed me. My mind raced, trying to piece together what I had just heard. Elizabeth, my wife, had a new husband? How could this be? My gaze darted around the room, catching the shocked expressions of our family and friends. The festive atmosphere had turned into a tableau of confusion and disbelief. Elizabeth continued, her voice steady now. "I've decided to move forward with someone who aligns more closely with the vision I have for our family and the company. Someone who can bring a fresh perspective." I felt a surge of betrayal, a cold wave crashing over me. "But Elizabeth, we've built this together," I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. "What about us? What about our plans?" She looked at me, her eyes softening for a moment. "Michael, you've done wonderfully, but times change. I need someone who can take us to new heights, someone who can offer different assets." The implication was clear, and it stung like a slap. I glanced at George, hoping for some support, but he simply nodded, his face a mask of businesslike detachment. "It's for the best, Michael. You've had your run, but we must look to the future." The room spun slightly as I tried to process this. The future of Thompson Enterprises, the company I had poured my heart into, was now in the hands of someone else. Someone who had apparently won Elizabeth's heart in ways I hadn't. I stood there, grappling with the shock, feeling the weight of the chandelier's light now more like a spotlight on my failure. The laughter had ceased, replaced by a heavy silence. I couldn't help but wonder what this meant for my future with the company and with Elizabeth. As the reality settled in, I realized that the empire I had helped build was slipping through my fingers, not through market forces or corporate takeovers, but through the personal betrayal of those I trusted most. The festive gathering had turned into a stage for my personal and professional downfall, and the only question left was, what would I do next? The night was restless, filled with confusion and a growing sense of betrayal. The next morning I arrived at the office, expecting some form of explanation or perhaps a retraction of the previous night's announcement. Instead, I was greeted by a transformed office environment. My nameplate was gone from my office door, replaced by one that read, Jonathan Hale, CEO. Jonathan Hale, a name I knew from business circles but had never met personally, was now walking the corridors of Thompson Enterprises with an air of ownership. Employees, some of whom I had hired and nurtured, now looked at me with a mix of pity and curiosity. Elizabeth was there too, her demeanor professional, almost cold. "Michael, we need to talk," she said, leading me to what used to be my office. Inside, she explained that Jonathan was not only her new husband, but also someone with fresh ideas for the company's future. As she spoke, I realized that my role in the company was not just being diminished, it was being completely eradicated. The office, once my sanctuary, now felt alien, every corner echoing with the whispers of my downfall. Elizabeth sat across from me, her eyes scanning my face for a reaction. "Jonathan has a vision for Thompson Enterprises," she said, her voice steady. "A vision that involves taking the company in a direction you might not have considered." I tried to muster some semblance of dignity, to keep my voice from breaking. "And what direction is that?" I asked, though part of me didn't want to know. "He believes in aggressive expansion, leveraging new markets, and integrating our business." "With his own," Elizabeth replied, her words measured, each one a calculated step away from our shared past. The mention of integration hit me like a physical blow. Integration? With his company, I echoed, the implications swirling in my mind. "Yes, Michael, it's a merger of sorts. Not just of companies, but of lives," she said, her gaze dropping to her hands, which were now clasped tightly in her lap. I felt the room closing in, the walls adorned with awards and accolades I had earned, now seeming to mock me. "And where does that leave me?" My voice was barely a whisper, the weight of my situation pressing down on me. Elizabeth looked up, her eyes meeting mine with a flicker of something I couldn't quite place. Regret, perhaps. Or was it relief? "You'll be taken care of, Michael. There's a severance package, and you'll have a chance to transition out smoothly. We want this to be as painless as possible." Painless. The word echoed hollowly in my mind. Painless for whom? Certainly not for me. My life, my career, my marriage, all were being dismantled with clinical precision. She continued, "Jonathan has already started implementing changes. He's brought in his team, and they're working on rebranding, restructuring. He believes in a leaner, more dynamic approach." I could see it now, the office buzzing with new energy, but it was energy that excluded me. The betrayal wasn't just personal, it was professional. My vision for Thompson Enterprises, the legacy I had tried to build, was being overwritten by this new narrative, this new chapter that had no room for me. "And what about us, Elizabeth?" I asked, my voice thick with emotion. "What about our family?" Her face softened, but only for a moment. "Michael, you know how much I care for you, but sometimes, for the greater good, personal sacrifices must be made. Jonathan and I, we share a vision, a passion for where this company can go." The realization hit me like a wave. This wasn't just about business strategy or corporate growth. It was about her choosing a different path, a different partner, in every sense of the word. As she spoke, I could see the future she envisioned, one where I was no longer the protagonist but a footnote, a cautionary tale of what happens when you're left behind by the very people you trusted to stand by your side. The office, once a place of my triumphs, now stood as a testament to my defeat. The nameplate on the door, Jonathan Hale. The days that followed were a blur of legal consultations and personal turmoil. My lawyer, Susan, advised me on my rights and the potential for legal action, but the emotional toll was immense. I confronted Elizabeth at home, where she revealed that she had been seeing Jonathan for months, believing he could take the company to new heights. "I thought you'd understand, Michael. This isn't personal, it's business," Elizabeth said, her voice devoid of the warmth that once defined our relationship. The betrayal stung, but what hurt more was the realization that my life's work was being handed over to someone else without any regard for my contributions. I couldn't sleep that night, the weight of the day's revelations pressing down on me, like a physical force. The next morning, I found myself driving to Jonathan's office, the cityscape blurring past as my mind replayed every moment of our past, every shared dream now turned to ash. Arriving at Hale Enterprises, I was met by a receptionist whose eyes widened slightly upon recognizing me. "Mr. Thompson, Mr. Hale is expecting you," she said, her voice tinged with a mix of sympathy and curiosity. The office was sleek, modern, a stark contrast to the traditional decor of Thompson Enterprises. Jonathan's office door was open, and there he was, standing by the window, looking out over the city like a conqueror surveying his domain. "Michael," he greeted, turning with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "I was expecting you. Please, come in." I stepped inside, the door closing behind me with a soft click that felt like the final nail in my coffin. "Jonathan," I began, my voice steady despite the storm inside. "I need to understand why. Why did you do this?" He gestured for me to sit, but I remained standing, my hands clenched at my sides. "Michael, business is about opportunity. Elizabeth and I saw an opportunity to grow, to innovate. You've done well, but sometimes change is necessary for progress." His words were like a slap, each one a reminder of my supposed inadequacy. "And what about loyalty? What about the years I've dedicated to this company, to Elizabeth?" Jonathan's expression hardened slightly. "Loyalty is important, Michael, but so is vision. Elizabeth and I share a vision, one that well, let's say you were too focused on maintaining the status quo." The room felt smaller, the air thicker with every word he spoke. "And what about our family, Jonathan? What about the life Elizabeth and I built together?" He sighed, looking genuinely troubled for a moment. "I understand this is hard for you, but sometimes for the greater good, personal sacrifices must be made. Elizabeth and I, we've made ours." The mention of personal sacrifices was like a knife, twisting in my gut. "You've made yours? What about mine? What about the life I thought I had?" Jonathan leaned back, his gaze steady. "You'll be taken care of, Michael. There's a severance package and you'll have time to transition out smoothly. We want this to be as painless as possible." Painless. The word echoed hollowly in my mind. Painless for whom? Certainly not for me. My life, my career, my marriage, all were being dismantled with clinical precision. As I stood there, the city skyline behind him, I realized that this wasn't just about business strategy or corporate growth. It was about Elizabeth choosing a different path, a different partner, in every sense of the word. The office, once a place of my triumphs, now stood as a testament to my defeat. The nameplate on the door, Jonathan Hale, CEO, was a stark reminder of where I now stood in this new narrative, this new chapter that had no room for me. With my world crumbling, I decided to confront Jonathan, seeking answers or perhaps a semblance of closure. But as I looked into his eyes, I knew that closure was a luxury I might never afford. The only question left was, what would I do next? The confrontation with Jonathan was set in the boardroom, a place where I had once commanded respect. The room was stark, the walls lined with portraits of past CEOs, their eyes seeming to judge me from their frames. Jonathan, younger and with an air of arrogance, stood at the head of the table, his confidence almost palpable. He explained his vision for the company, which included downsizing and restructuring, effectively erasing much of what I had built. "You've done well, Michael, but it's time for new blood," Jonathan said, his words like daggers piercing through the silence. His voice was smooth, almost soothing, but the message was clear. My time was up. In a moment of desperation, I proposed a challenge, a business pitch to the board where the best idea would win the CEO position. Jonathan, confident in his abilities, agreed with a smirk that suggested he thought I was foolish for even suggesting such a contest. The pitch day arrived, and I presented a plan that not only preserved the company's core values, but also promised significant growth through innovation. I spoke with passion, detailing how we could expand into new markets, leveraging technology to streamline operations and enhance customer engagement. My pitch was about continuity, about building on the foundation I had laid, about loyalty to the company's heritage. Jonathan's pitch, on the other hand, was aggressive, focusing on cost-cutting and market expansion through acquisitions. He spoke of slashing jobs, of aggressive takeovers, and of a vision that seemed to disregard the human element, the soul, of Thomson Enterprises. The board, after a tense deliberation, voted in my favor. The room was silent as the votes were counted, each one a small victory against the tide of change Jonathan represented. They recognized the value of continuity and my proven track record. As I reclaimed my position, the relief was palpable, but it was short-lived. The victory was Pyrrhic. The trust and love I once shared with Elizabeth were irrevocably broken. She stood at the back of the room, her expression unreadable, but her eyes told a story of decisions made and paths chosen that no longer included me. Jonathan, ever the gracious loser, shook my hand, his grip firm, his eyes cold. "Congratulations, Michael, but remember, this isn't over. The game has just begun," he whispered, his words a veiled threat. The board members congratulated me, but their congratulations felt hollow, their smiles strained. The atmosphere was charged with an unspoken tension, the kind that precedes a storm. As the meeting adjourned, I walked out of the boardroom, the weight of my victory heavy on my shoulders. The corridors of Thomson Enterprises, once familiar and comforting, now felt like a labyrinth where every turn could lead to another betrayal. I returned to my office, now mine again, but it felt different. The nameplate on the door, Michael, Thomson CEO, was a reminder of what I had fought for, but also of what I had lost. The room was quiet, too quiet. The silence filled with the echoes of past laughter, of shared dreams with Elizabeth, now just memories. Sitting at my desk, I looked out over the city, the skyline a stark contrast to the turmoil inside me. The victory was mine, but at what cost? The company was safe for now, but my personal life was in ruins. Elizabeth's choice had not just been about business, it was about us, about our family, about the life we had built together, now dismantled by ambition and desire for something new. The phone rang, breaking the silence. It was Susan, my lawyer. "Michael, we need to talk about your options," she said, her voice professional yet tinged with concern. I knew what she meant. Legal battles, negotiations, perhaps even a fight to keep what was left of my dignity. But as I hung up, I realized that the real battle was within. How do you fight for something that's already been lost? How do you rebuild when the foundation of your life has been shaken to its core? The office, once my sanctuary, now felt like a battleground. The nameplate on the door, Michael Thomson, CEO, was both a shield and a sword. I had won the battle, for the company. But in the aftermath of the boardroom battle, I remained CEO of Thomson Enterprises, but the company was never the same. The victory felt hollow, like a victory in a war that had already claimed too much. Elizabeth and I separated, the personal betrayal too deep to mend. The trust that once bound us together was shattered, leaving only the fragments of what we had built. Jonathan, despite his loss, was given a significant role in the company. His ideas, though aggressive, were not entirely discarded. He became the head of a new division, focusing on the very expansion strategies he had pitched. It was a compromise, a way to keep the peace, but it also served as a constant reminder of the upheaval that had taken place. I learned that in business, as in life, loyalty can be as fleeting as success. The board's decision to retain me was not just about my vision for the company, it was also a strategic move to maintain stability in the face of potential chaos. But the scars of betrayal ran deep, and the atmosphere within the company was charged with an undercurrent of tension. I rebuilt my personal life, focusing on new ventures and personal growth. I threw myself into philanthropy, establishing a foundation to support emerging entrepreneurs, a way to give back and perhaps, in some small measure, to atone for the ruthlessness I had once embraced in business. But the lesson from Thompson: enterprises lingered. Trust once broken leaves scars that time alone cannot heal. The office, now mine again, was a place of both triumph and tragedy. The nameplate on the door, Michael Thompson, CEO, was a symbol of resilience, but also of the battles fought and the personal costs incurred. Every morning, as I walked through those corridors, I could feel the weight of the past, the echoes of laughter now replaced by the silent whispers of what could have been. I often found myself standing by the window, looking out over the city. The skyline, once a source of inspiration, now seemed to mock me with its endless possibilities, its lights a stark contrast to the darkness within. I wondered if I would ever find someone who valued both my heart and my work as I had once hoped. The city, with its relentless pace, seemed indifferent to my personal turmoil, its pulse beating on regardless of the personal dramas unfolding within its glass towers. The board meetings were different now. There was a new formality, a distance that hadn't existed before. Jonathan, with his new role, was a constant presence, his eyes often meeting mine with a mix of respect and challenge. We were allies in business, but the personal rift was palpable, a silent acknowledgement of the past. My relationship with Elizabeth was reduced to legal documents and formalities. The warmth we once shared was replaced by the cold efficiency of lawyers and accountants. Our children, caught in the middle, bore the brunt of our fractured relationship, their innocence a casualty of our ambitions. As I sat at my desk, the phone rang again. It was Susan, my lawyer, with updates on the ongoing negotiations regarding our separation. Her voice was a reminder of the battles still to be fought, not just for the company, but for the remnants of my personal life. Michael, we've managed to secure a favorable settlement, Susan's voice came through the line, professional yet with a hint of relief. Elizabeth has agreed to terms that ensure your financial stability and continued involvement with the company. I thanked her, but the victory felt Pyrrhic. What was financial stability without the love and trust that once filled my life? The office, once a place of dreams and ambition, now felt like a mausoleum of lost hopes. The city skyline outside my window was a constant reminder of the world moving forward, of new opportunities and new beginnings. Yet as I looked out, I couldn't help but feel the weight of the past, the betrayal, and the personal sacrifices made in the name of progress. And as I stood there, the question lingered in my mind, a silent echo in the vastness of the city. Would I ever find someone who valued both my heart and my work as I had once hoped? The answer, like the future, remained uncertain, a cliffhanger in the narrative of my life. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment if you enjoyed this story. This will help us create more engaging stories for you.